Here we go. We are back on Always Another Game podcast, where today I'm going to go deep inside athlete's mind, who is also a fellow ice hockey player. And I'm going to get this athlete to share his story of the challenges that he's faced, not only through sport, but through broadcasting, and what he's bringing to not only sport, but to life in today's world. Today, I have with me a good friend, Nick Rothwell. How's it going, Nick?
Really good, Shaun. How are you, buddy?
Yeah, very good. As if you're watching on video, anybody, you can see I have a lovely glow on my face today. I spent the whole day outside yesterday from 10 till 3 playing netball, actually.
Nice.
Something I've never done before.
Beautiful. Yeah, I actually thought I was getting some sun, but then as soon as I saw the cameras on us, I was like, dude, I look pasty.
Yeah, I think this was just not looking after myself yesterday with suntan lotion. But yeah, if anyone's only listening on audio, I am as red as could be. So, but it's not stinging, so I'll take that. So Nick is joining me all the way from, I'm going to say this right, Czechia, as some of us may know, Czech Republic. What's taking you over there?
I moved here with my wife and family a year ago. Yeah, it's just coming up to a year, and she's from this city of about 80,000 people in the south, and she moved to London when she was 19 to pursue her education. And we met there like four years ago, when we were both in a really good place in our lives, and we fell in love. And she told me, "Oh, I've got 3 boys, Nick," and I was so in love with her. I was like, I don't care. A lot of people are like, oh, Nick, you took on another three boys. You went from the age of 50, from having no kids to having 3 in a month. But you know what, Shaun, like raising boys in East London was, I'm always going to be a Londoner, even though I sound funny because I'm from Canada originally. But it was just the economy the way it was. And it was just like, oh, geez. But we would come here on holidays, and they loved, like, their grandparents are here, and they would love coming here, and they play like all the sports they can play, and it's a safe city, and it's nice. And we were just like, for our family, let's move out here. And yeah, we've been here for a year now, and it's been awesome.
I'm sure you are not the only one. I know I've been thinking about moving away very loosely, but it's in the back of my mind, and I'm sure we're not the only ones who are thinking the same thing. I talk to a lot of people in like Dubai, and they say it's the best thing that they've done is getting out.
Yeah.
So there you go. If anyone's listening, Nick backs that up as well.
I do back it up, and folks, I love London. I love England. It's nothing, it is just what is best for the family was to be able to come out here and give them access to more options in their lives. And that includes playing a lot of sports. So that's really why we did it.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why we're here today. So perfect timing. What I love everybody to hear right early on, just to get to know you a little bit better, is who is Nick Rothwell?
Yeah, you prepped me with that before we recorded, and I was, you know what, I'm just Nick. I'm a constantly evolving person, trying to learn and be a better man every day. But also, I'm wearing this T-shirt that I got from my wife's bridesmaid at the wedding, which was a year ago. I'm a hubby, so maybe I first and foremost, I'm a husband today, which is beautiful. But I'm a lot of things, Shaun. Like I said, I'm a guy who just tries to be a better man every day. And but I'm a husband, I'm a stepfather, I'm a seasoned athlete. That's my new word for it, because I'm 53 with a new hip, and I'm getting back involved in sports. So I'm not retired, I'm not a veteran, but I'm a seasoned athlete.
I like that. But anybody again who is watching on video, Nick does not look 53. Like, it's insane. What's the secret? Come on, there must be one.
Having 3 stepsons, not having a drink in over 8 years, not having a drink or mind altering substance. I'm completely sober, and I just try to eat. Although I'm not, as you know from our conversations, I'm not a perfect eater. I don't think anybody is, but I just try to look after myself, and I think I have some pretty good genetics too. My mom and dad. My mom and dad were pretty fit we're fit-ish, I guess, throughout their years. So
yeah. Because obviously, I ask most guests that question when we come on, and some struggle with it. And what I'm trying to get from it is that, look, we are athletes, current, retired, seasoned, but there is so much more to us as a person than just being an athlete. And that's why I think a lot of people do struggle, is that they can't lose that identity as they're playing in the life afterwards. And I want to show people that, being a husband, being a hubby is a performance. It's a daily activity in itself. Being a father, a mother, a stepmother, a stepfather is a performance in itself. Being a coach, a friend, there's so much more to it than just seeing yourself as an athlete. And I think that's really important to know, that we are all humans and we all do human stuff on a day-to-day basis. It's just some people have gone further and higher in their careers.
Yeah, I mean, and which is what I'm sure we'll get into. It depends on how you gauge your career, right? If you're saying whether or not you played in the top league somewhere, or earned money in what you played, or just did it for fun and excelled to it. I always like using the phrase "maximize your performance in the sport that you play," and it is a sport that you play. I always struggled with, I am Nick, I am an ice hockey player. And then all of a sudden, when I wasn't an ice hockey player, I'm like, oh, what am I? Rather than I'm Nick, a guy who plays ice hockey.
Yeah, I like that reframe, because I was exactly the same. When I finished playing, I was a bit lost, actually. I was kind of like, I had my personal training. I knew there was something else for me to do, which was great. But I was like, yeah, but what do I do with that now? I don't want to train. I don't want to train like I used to. I used to kill myself in the gym. I liked it, but I don't want to do it anymore. And it was after that realization that actually, no, I am a father, and I am a husband, and I've got to still perform, even though I'm not on the ice anymore. But it's such a big part of us, isn't it? For players like you and I, and anybody that's listening that's been doing it since their childhood, it's such a long period of time. It's deeply ingrained in us. And to kind of remove that, like, as we know with any form of habit, it's very difficult.
It really is. And I played ice hockey since I was 5 years old. It was the core of the sports that I played, because I grew up in Canada, so that is the sport that everybody plays. And I played along with like many other sports as well, but it was hockey that got me a career. It was hockey that got me to move countries, from Canada to the UK. And it was where, I don't care if you're playing in front of 1,000 people on the Isle of Wight, or 10,500 people in front of Sheffield, the feeling is the same. But also the feelings in the changing room, where you identify with 20 other guys who play the same sport. And you're going out there, and I mean, it's a very physical game, and there's a lot of risk that's entailed when you play hockey. And that's why I think the bonds are so strong, because you could go out there in a shift and you get stitches, you break a bone, you could do that to somebody else as well. And in that risk, stronger bonds are created. And then all of a sudden it's gone. And you're like, what? So it wasn't so much the playing of the game. It was like the accountability that I had from my teammates that I missed.
Yeah. One thing I've found fascinating since finishing playing is, no matter how long you were with people, no matter how tight you were, it's so easy to drift away. You will still have that bond when you come back together. It will be like normal, but yet you might not see these people for a year, 5, 10 years. You just go your own ways after all of that time. And you spend more time sometimes with your teammates than you do your family.
Yeah.
Gone, just like that in a moment.
Yeah. And you can't prepare for that, because like you said, all of a sudden, like you drift fast, like you'll go from like, a month to the end of this, from the end of the season. And all of a sudden all the guys are either going to new teams, or they're re-signing, or they're retiring. And then you're off doing whatever you're going to be doing. And, people get busy, and it's not like everyone's on the phone, like checking up on anybody anymore. They get busy with their lives and their families. And yeah, you said that you drift away, and it happens fast. It really does. It's quite scary when you think about it. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Well, you said it started at home in Canada for you. It was ice hockey. Most people will know that that's the sport there. It's kind of in similar to like maybe with like New Zealand in rugby. There are more sports coming up through these nations now, but obviously ice hockey is it's the home sport over there. But what was it about ice hockey for you that made you fall in love?
I think it was like seeing my dad become very passionate about hockey. He was an Englishman, an immigrant, who'd gone over there to teach. And then I was born there, and we'd sit up watching Hockey Night in Canada on Saturday nights. And I would see him get really, really excited by it. And I mean, I remember the first time that I went skating. He went on with his shoes because he couldn't skate. He just held my hand, and I had these little bob skates, and I fell on the ice, and I just remember crying because I was like, my hands touched the ice, and I was so shocked at how cold it was. I mean, I was 3 or 4 years old, but I have this
Mm.
memory. And then just seeing my dad being passionate about it, and then all of a sudden you're at school, and you're not playing organized hockey yet, but everyone's outside at recess, in the wintertime, and there's frozen ice outside in the back of schools, and you get a stick, and you'd get a frozen tennis ball because pucks would hurt. So you get a tennis ball and you just play shinny outside, and then it's just that's how you got made friends. And it was like, we grew up in the day where there wasn't computer games and iPads and iPhones to keep kids inside. We had to go outside to entertain ourselves, and it didn't matter if it was -20 out. We were outside playing hockey around the back alleys and in the schoolyards, and that's just the way it was. It was what we used to keep ourselves entertained, and how to learn how to play and to form relationships with people. So that's why hockey. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny you say that actually, because my dad was exactly the same. He never played, but he fell in love with the game and kind of got us into it through his own passion. And he learned to play as we were learning to play. So I remember my
Mm,
dad going on the learn to play sessions, like adult learn to play sessions. So it's actually interesting
wow.
to hear somebody else say that, because often it's like, well, I love football, I play football, so is my kid. I play ice hockey, so is my kid. I play tennis, so is my kid. But it's actually interesting to see from another perspective where a parent actually hasn't played, yet you can form the passion just through their love of something,
Yeah.
which I think is interesting for any parents listening to know that they don't have to just follow your sport. They actually may love something else. You may actually love something else. So it's actually, quite refreshing to hear another parent story like that.
Yeah, it also is like, when I tell my story too, like my dad he was my hero in so many ways. I really looked up to him. He's a really big, strong guy. But I was also quite scared of him. I grew up in a time where discipline was rained down by my father, and if my sisters or my mom or something upset him, he had a drink in him. He got very aggressive, and it scared me. So in a way, it's this kind of duality too, Sean, of like really of just wanting to please him because I was scared of him in a way, but also, I saw in him when he was sober what a good man he was, and what a good educator he was, and what a good athlete he was. So there was a lot of things that even at 53 years old, I'm still working through with regards to that relationship that I had with my dad, and the fear that he instilled through all this discipline is something that, as we talked about, be kind of this unlearning of what the things that we learned from our parents, so that we don't pass them down to our kids.
Yeah, and I think that's with anything in life, right? With parenting, with coaching, with anything, nobody's perfect. You can't be perfect. And even the greatest of coaches have their flaws. Even the greatest of parents have their flaws. And it's looking at what's the good sides and looking at, the not so good sides, and making sure that we're not falling down that trap of trying to be a perfectionist, because it isn't possible. It's a surefire way to unhappiness, being
Oh
a
yeah,
perfectionist.
yeah.
And we spoke about it briefly before. Parenting is hard, really hard,
Mm,
in many
yeah.
different ways. Um, so, do you think things would have been different then if your dad wasn't such a disciplinarian?
Oh, I mean, I'm sure there was, in that discipline. I think discipline is good, and I think I'm trying to instill discipline. It's just the way that at which he did it. And I think he just didn't know he was an abused child. He had a lot of trauma that he had to unlearn, and it just got passed down. So I don't know, like, yeah, sure, I wish I did. And I'm trying to do it, but sometimes I fail at it. And you use this word perfect, trying to be a perfect, and whether it's a perfect athlete, a perfect parent, a perfect business owner. These are just searches for things that are not possible, and in it creates so much discomfort. So when I, met my wife, I was like, I'm going to be everything my dad wasn't. I'm going to, and what was I doing this morning? Right, I was cleaning the house. It's my Monday ritual. Is I clean the house because my dad didn't really do a lot of housework. So I make sure that the boys, they don't necessarily see me doing it, but they know that it's my responsibility. Is that I vacuum and I mop the floors, and I do most of the cooking, because I want to really be active in that part of their lives, to show them that, this is what I would want to do to try to make this a safe environment and a safe house. Is I pull my weight. But in doing so, I'm trying too hard, and this is a struggle that I'm going through right now, is that I'm trying to control, because I want the boys to grow up and be really good, solid citizens and gentlemen and have all the tools that I didn't have. I'm overcompensating in some ways, but then also I'm like, okay, they need discipline. So that means I have to raise my voice, or I have to make a point, or I have to withhold something because they didn't do what I said. And Shaun, it's made me really uncomfortable over the last, since we moved into this, we bought a new flat. And I've just been, because it's new and renovated, I've been trying to control it, making sure it's really like kept proper. But I've got a 15-year-old, a 12-year-old, and an 8-year-old boy. They're not going to keep it perfect.
No.
So there's a lot of things that I need to unlearn. But it's a process of, like I said to you at the beginning, what kind of man am I? Who am I? I'm a man who needs to try to be better every day, which means that I make mistakes, which means I have to learn from my mistakes, hold my hand up when I make a mistake, say I'm sorry, and just keep trying and do better. And that's, yeah. So that's the bit around perfectionism, is it's unattainable, but all we can do is just keep trying
It's fascinating
to do our
because
best.
you talk about learning a lot. You're a keen learner. I know that. I know with everything you're doing, you're always learning, which is fantastic. But you've mentioned quite a bit there about unlearning, and to say that your dad, he was abused and that was passed down and he passed it down. What do you think? Do you remember the point, or do you where you went, actually, no, that's not who I'm going to be, whereas you were able to catch it, but maybe your dad wasn't?
Yeah, I mean, when I was younger, like when I was in my teens, I just remember my mom pushing a vacuum around and us kind of, all of us just sitting around and watching, and me like seeing her, and the mistake that I made now wasn't what was like, can I help you, mom? Right? It was just like, oh, mom is doing, the housework, even though she had a full-time job. And would look at my dad, and he would have his nose in a book and his feet up on his chair, and he would just be, and I was like, oh man, I'm going to make sure that I don't do that, because I could see that it was upsetting my mom, and it's my mom, both my mom and dad have passed, and it's been, when my mom died, it was a very, very tough time in my life, because she was such an amazing person, but she died so unhappy. And it's something that I really want to make sure that the people in my life don't ever feel that kind of unhappiness. So it was at a fairly young age that I would notice things like this, and then through all of my relationships, just trying to make sure that I didn't have those bad habits of not helping. I'm not saying you have to do all of the housework, but help.
Mm.
It's a house we all live in, so just do your part. And then the boys, again, everybody has chores, but I want them to be able to see, that who they know that I love their mother. I want them to be able to see that by me, taking action in the house and having pride in the house, and hopefully that when they're older, they're where I was, and they're going to go, oh, you know what? This is how to behave. This is the actions to take to make a happy household, or happy-ish household. No, again, nothing's perfect, but I'm just trying to teach them the things that I wish that I would have been taught.
Yeah. Well, we will get into what you actually do,
Hmm.
but with what you do in your coaching space now, there's a lot of empathy, and it was almost like you had that empathetic side in you early on. Did that come from your mother's side, or where did that come from?
Yeah. Oh, my mom was definitely a very sensitive soul. And I think that she could she could feel outside of herself. And she was a very giving and caring person. And she would do anything to make sure somebody felt comfortable and safe. So I think it was definitely, I'd like to say it's from my mom's side, but also I would like to say that my dad had become half and half, right?
Yeah.
But I've always been a very sensitive person, and I've always considered people's feelings. I've always known when other people are upset, and I've not been necessarily been able to have the language to help, but I've definitely known in my body. I've been able to feel other people's feelings. And I think that comes from my mom's side.
Yeah. I think that's where it starts, isn't it? It's the traits
Mm.
that we get brought up on with parents, schools, teachers, and understanding those key values. I love the saying, your values and visions drive every decision. And I believe when you get that aligned, you actually find your purpose in life. to what you want to do. And obviously yours does sound like it fell into place. But before we kind of get into where you are now, why the UK? Ice hockey is not as big over here. Why did you come over?
So as I mentioned, well, yes, I played a lot of sports. So hockey in the winter, and then football, like soccer in the summer. And they were my two key sports. They kept me busy 12 months of the year. And even indoor football throughout the winter. So I was always playing sport. And then on the side, I had problems with my temper. I was quite an angry kid. And my dad noticed that in me. And rather than like lashing out at people, he brought me down to a boxing gym when I was 12. So I learned how to box. I learned how to give a punch, but more importantly, I learned how to take one. And from people who are smaller than me, and like learn a little bit about respect. So I never ended up in any street fights or anything like that, because I could handle that side of things. I started to control my temper, but then I also was known for losing it on the ice a little bit. And I had problems with my temper with some hockey teams and with discipline. Enough to get kicked off of some teams. So, and which ultimately helped me, Shaun. It helped me get class as a British hockey player, because I wasn't registered after the age of 16, because I got booted off a team. And then I played some junior B hockey in Saskatoon. They weren't always like, they didn't follow the book all the time. So I was playing unregistered and uninsured. And my dad and we would have, this is why I love my dad so much, and God bless him. Like I said, for all of his faults, he was a good guy. And we would sit up in the summer and we watched David Letterman, and we would just talk, and we would plan out life. And it was around 13, 14 years old. He was like, Nick, I heard hockey in the UK is growing. And this is mid to late 80s. And he goes, why don't you just try to get to a certain level and go over there and play and put yourself through university? You don't have to be the best guy. You don't have to be, you just be what I was always just known as a hardworking hockey player with a fairly good shot. And when I was 18, I literally went over there with my middle sister at the time. We went over for a vacation. I had a 6-month open ticket. Stayed with my sister. I sent my CV to a few teams, but nothing happened. And I ended up getting a job in a leisure rink in Doncaster. And I went down there. You can't play hockey there. It was like a split level thing with ramps and stuff. And they were like, oh, yeah. I was like, are there any jobs? Maybe I can teach skating or something. They said, wait, can you drive the Zamboni? And I said, of course I can. I'm Canadian. And that was a big lie. Something that I learned very, very good to do. I was very charming and a BSer. I won't swear on your podcast, but I was a BSer, and mainly through some of the things that I learned to protect myself. Growing up with a scared household, as you become very manipulative. But these things became assets for me as I became very charming, and I got a lot of stuff, Shaun, when I was 18. But I became a Zamboni driver, and I became really good at it. But again, no ins with any teams. I didn't have a big enough name to take an import spot. And that's what people thought I was, even though I had a British passport. So this plan was like, oh no, what's going on? What's going on? But eventually Milton Keynes opened up in 91, and I became the Zamboni driver down there. And then I became a very good Zamboni driver, and I was training with people, with Mike Serrant, who was the coach there, and Patty Scott, God bless him, and Troy Kennedy, and so I was staying on the ice, but again, I wasn't nowhere near import quality. And then the Isle of Wight opened up, and then I met a girl who was a professional figure skater. So the two of us went down there as a team. She was a pro skater. I was a Zamboni driver. We opened up the rink on the Isle of Wight. And I got a spot playing there. I played a few games as a British guy because Ken Taggart had noticed that I wasn't insured, wasn't registered in Canada, so I had a British tag. And then Sheffield Steelers picked me up in their first season. So I went from the Isle of Wight after playing a few games up to Sheffield. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to work really hard at this, and I'm actually going to throw myself into being, the best hockey player that I can be. And really, at the age of 19, that I really go full into, like training in the summer and working really hard at my skating and my shooting. And that's how my career started in the UK. That's how it all happened.
Yeah, and the most fascinating bit is I don't remember Nick Rothwell as a hockey player, um, but the name and where you sit, like you said, the kind of you make the big name for yourself. For me, I know Nick Rothwell, the Sky broadcaster, because your
Yeah.
hockey career took you into something even bigger after you finished playing, right?
Yeah, and again, that was like through. So I had a, I probably could have played at Sheffield, but I got fired because the manager and I had a disagreement over a paycheck. And then I bopped around to a few teams, mainly on the island. I had my most success, and probably could have played, in a top in the British BD1 at the time, which would be about the second division, which I ended up in Guildford. But I had some really great seasons on the island because I did go off and get my degree. And I went to Winchester to study English literature and history. So I was commuting from the island to Winchester and getting a degree in English literature because I knew hockey only has a lifespan. So I wanted to be a teacher and teach English literature because I really had a great English teacher when I was in high school. And Sky Sports started covering the hockey, and I had a really great season on the island. And Guildford were interested in me, so Guildford then that off season were like, Nick, we'll pick you up. They offered me a professional contract to go to Guildford, and that was my last year at university. And Sky had, like I said, just started covering the hockey, and I noticed the producer's name at the end of a show. Her name was Trisha Tolchard. And this is back in the day, right, when you could phone up Sky and get through to somebody and not have a automated telephone service. But I said, hi, my name is Nick Rothwell. I'm playing hockey for the Guildford Flames. I'm doing a media class at university. Can I come and watch you make a show? Now, Shaun, that's a lie because I'm doing English literature and history. But she's sure you can come up. And I went up to Sky and Isleworth and I watched them edit a show together. And I was like, look, if there's anything I can do, it's coming towards the end of the season, if there's anything I can do, like, let me know. And she said, so, we've got all our on ice, on air talent for next year sorted out. But if anything comes up, I'll let you know. And then I was like, okay, I got to get a job in London. I want to live in London. And I was living on the island, and I got a job in this Westminster publication doing sales. And I started on the Monday, and this is coming up to the beginning of the season. And I hated it. I hated the job. And all of a sudden the phone rings, and Sky, 2 games into the season, Sky had started their coverage, and my phone rang, and Nick, it's Trish. Can you come into Sky immediately? We've got a proposition for you. And apparently the on ice reporter, the rinkside reporter, the boss of Sky saw him and was like, I never want to see this guy in vision again. So Trisha had like, what do I do? And because I'd reached out to her, a few months before, I was the only name on her mind. And I went in and I lied to my employers. I said, Sky want to do an interview with me. And they said, a lot of lying going on, right? And I went in, and it was a Thursday, and Mark Sharman was the boss of Sky at the time, Sky Sports. And he said, look, here's the job. Here's the money. Do you want it or not? And I was like, well, can I come and watch you make a show first? He goes, no. He goes, you make a decision now. And I was like, okay, I'll take it. And I'd never been in front of a camera, never known anything about it. But I ended up doing my first live game that Saturday. I didn't even go back to that office. It was the beginning. It was the Super League era, so the first season of the Super League, and I was the ringside guy, and I was getting a lot of money because they have to pay you what other presenters get. They can't pay you more or less. It's just kind of flat rate. If you were in vision, you got paid. So I was making a lot of money, Shaun, and I really loved it. And I was still trying to play with Guildford. Stan Marple had come in and was coaching by then, and I ended up playing like a few games with them while being on TV. But yeah, that's how it all worked out.
Yeah, it's just that stepping point. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right? You got to shoot your shot, and you did. And I think I think that's a key lesson in itself. That a lot of people are afraid. Well, I'm not qualified enough, so what's the point? Well, the point is you just don't know. If you don't shoot, you ain't going to score.
Yeah, and I'm sure those opportunities still exist today, but I know that right now, like TV, people like me are now not really needed in live TV anymore, but I gained a lot of skills. And I was a pretty good TV presenter, and I really, really enjoyed it. I think it's one of the best environments that I've ever worked in. I loved the pressure. I loved everything that you needed to do. There's nothing like going live, you know, and it was awesome. But inside of me, like on the outside, you know, because I'd started a company too. I started a production company as well. So on the outside, you know, you'd be like, "Oh, Nick, you're 28 years old. You've made it, man. You're on TV. You've got a production company. You've got a Porsche. You've got a beautiful actress girlfriend." Because I left the island. I left my wife, and you know, I was hanging out in all the nightclubs in Soho, and on the shopping on Savile Row with a stylist from Sky with a huge budget. But inside, Shaun, you know, it was this thing of like, "Oh, I'm not a hockey player anymore, and I don't really deserve this because you kind of bullshitted your way." Sorry, I said bullshit. So yeah, I
All
BS.
good.
Okay, I BS my way onto TV. I charmed. I just felt like a fraud, huge imposter syndrome, you know, and it just crushed me. And I never drank or did drugs at that kind of level before. You know, I did because my dad was an alcoholic. I didn't want to drink, but then all of a sudden, like you're hanging out in the nightclubs in Soho with other ex-hockey players, and they, you know, introduce you to a line of cocaine, and you have that with your martini, and all of a sudden all those fears of being an imposter, they disappear, and it's like all these cogs click into place, and you're like, oh, I feel like a transformer. I fit in now. I feel normal, you know. And that's what alcohol did for me, is it took that all that fear away, even from, you know, from the TV and the fraud side of things, right to the 8-year-old kid. You know, all of a sudden, all these fears vanished, and I just felt like I could breathe. It wasn't like a feeling of getting intoxicated or high. It was just a feeling of normalcy, one that I constantly tried to search for again and again and again and again and again through all the consequences of it for years. And I never ever achieved that same connection as I did the first time. It was always a search for it, and
Mm,
more disconnection, more search for connection. And I always looked for it in a bottle, and it brought me into some really, really dark places.
mm. Yeah, because as you said, the life of Nick Rothwell in the UK was just growing. It was just growing and learning, and the opportunities. You know, for anybody that doesn't know, Isle of Wight to Guildford to Sheffield, that's a huge step up. You know, these are top teams in the ice hockey world over here, and they still are today. Um, and then, you know, Sky Sports, right? You're on the TV. This is fascinating. What do you? I know you expressed there that all these feelings came out, but I'm sure that first time you were offered the drink, or as you said there, the line of cocaine, I'm sure in your head you didn't just go, "Woohoo, let's go!" Like you'd never done this before. So,
Mm.
what do you think? What do you think that action point was? That tipping point? You know what? I am actually going to do this.
I wanted to fit in.
Mm,
I wanted to fit in. I was with some guys who I really thought were cool, and I just wanted to fit in. I wanted their acceptance, and that was it. It was, you know, I wasn't searching for the effect. Although when I did find the effect, I wanted that more. But it was more this thing, this need in me to become accepted. Something that was going way before that. It's like I would do things, silly things, just not because I wanted to do those things, but because I wanted the people around me to think I was cool, you know. And that's something that I work with guys today, is why do we do the things that we do? Why, you know, why is there infidelity in your life when you love your wife, you know, but you're with some guys in a pub, and the guys are like, "Go on, you know, get her number." You don't want her number. You just want the guys to say, "Wow, you know, look at Nick, he can get girls' numbers." And these are this is something that, again, I could kind of trace back to. There's my need to be accepted, was really the driving force in me leaning over, you know, the toilet and off of someone's gold card, American Express. I remember it so clearly, and just wanted him to think I was cool.
mm. This wasn't a 5 minute thing for you, though, was it? This wasn't just something that you did a couple of times hanging out and then it stopped. This went deeper.
Well, I got it. I mean, you're talking about the partying and stuff, you know, like,
Yeah, and
yeah,
kind of that middle
yeah.
ground to what you do now.
Well, dude, for a year and a half, it was fun. You know, like there's nothing like, you know, being like on a table service guest lists in the top clubs in London in the late 90s. And that was a hedonistic scene, but a lot of fun, and there was a lot of drinking and drugging and girls and infidelity and I'm not saying that all of that is, well, I'm not saying that it is fun, but in the time you're enjoying it. When you look back at it, you're really ashamed. But in the time, with you're with guys who are very successful, they all look good, they all dress well, and I fit in now. I now know it was like it was my hockey team. Like it was what I was missing when I missed the changing room. So all of a sudden I was fitting with these guys. They could outspend me, they could out style me, but I wanted to be them. So I probably pushed things a little bit too far. And when you're a fairly healthy guy at 30 years old, and you can brush off a hangover, and you can get up in the morning, and you can get to work, and you can put on a suit, and you can do that for years, which is what I did. And I moved countries. I moved to LA to work with Fox Sports out there, but they couldn't get me a work permit. They sent me up to Winnipeg to work for Fox World there. But wherever I was my challenges, and this challenge of feeling hugely disconnected, and knowing that if I took a drink, I could feel that immediate connection. But the relationships around me were not deep, and nobody, including those guys in London, were ever going to call me on my BS like the guys in the changing room would. You would just not be friends with them. And so my relationships just became more surface like and just acquaintances. And if I felt uncomfortable, I would just do what any alcoholic does, which is just move. And I moved so many times, Shaun, just so people wouldn't get to know me. And so I could drink the way I wanted to drink. And again, nobody on the outside would be like, he's got a drinking problem. But I would go home and I would eventually start drinking alone. And whenever anything bad happened, that was always my solution. And then the real consequences happened when I was back in London in 2012 and 2011. My mom died, and just before, it was 2011, just before Christmas. My mom died, and I got a DUI for. I should have gone to jail. That kind of DUI. And I can't blame my mom's death, but I was in a really bad way, and I drank and drank and drank, and then I just had this insane thought that I had to deliver Christmas presents. I wasn't even thinking about how much I'd had to drink the day before, because I was drinking the day before, but it was in the morning, and I got pulled over and I got arrested, and that wasn't enough, and I moved countries. I moved back to Canada, and I would build my life up. And met somebody, and I was 42 years old, and she became pregnant, and we got married, and we were like, we're going to have a kid. And again, on the outside, I had a beautiful house and 2 cars, and starting another production company, and everything was going well. But I was still drinking behind her back. I wasn't drinking in the house or anything. But she was like, Nick, something's wrong. I could just tell something's wrong, and I was keeping secrets. Just the fact that I had liquor in the garage, and I'll go outside and have a couple of swigs every once in a while, was enough for her empathy to kick in and go, something's wrong. And she had a miscarriage at 3 months, and she left. She went back to her parents in New York and in Rochester, and I did a silly thing, and I went to go after her, and I got arrested again. And this time it wasn't a drunk tank; it was like jail, and like a penitentiary, and just outside of St. Catharines, and with like in a range, like it's a dorm with 30 murders and rapists and drug dealers and wife beaters. And there I am, how the hell did I get here? Detoxing, sleeping underneath the table because they wouldn't give me a bed. And eventually I got out of that, and I found the rooms of 12-step recovery, where I struggled and struggled and struggled for a year and a half, going into rooms and always feeling separate. This whole thing of disconnection just followed me. I was different than if you would drink, if the things that had happened to you had happened to you, and always playing the ego me game. And it was all feel sorry for me. And then, and I remember, Shaun, I got a month of sobriety. Me and another guy were kind of like, we were roommates, and I was doing really well. But then I wanted to go on a date with a girl. And the guy who was sponsoring me was like, Nick, you got 30 days. Don't go yet. Don't go. And I was like, no, I know better. I know better. And I was sitting across from this beautiful girl in this restaurant. She said, "Surely you can have a glass of wine with your pizza." And for a guy like me, without any kind of solution in your life, you're defenseless against that drink. And that wine was down me so fast. And that began this 8-month run of drinking a liter of vodka a day with no food, maybe just some peanut M&Ms, because I thought insanely you could get the 5 food groups in the peanut M&M. And I was dying of acute pancreatitis and liver failure and kidney failure, and dehydration and malnutrition. And the doctors were telling me, you're not going to make it, kid. And I could feel death. I could feel death. And that's when the miracle happened. That's when, I was finally, my ego was crushed to the point, because, I was taught, these are the unlearnings, right? I was taught by my dad that real men never ask for help. Real men sort out all their own problems. Real men never show emotions. And these are the things that he really believed. And they were instilled in me from a very young age. And then finally, at 45 years old, when I was so crushed, I finally said those 2 words that saved my life. And those 2 words were "help me." And I said them to a man who I wanted what he had. And he brought me through the 12 steps of recovery. And I haven't looked back since. And I've just celebrated 8 years of sobriety on May 28th. And I've not thought about a drink in that long, which is a miracle. Yeah.
Yeah. I've heard you share parts of the story before. We've had chats and things. I haven't necessarily heard the depth that you've gone into today. And, from somebody sitting here on the outside, it's a series of events. It's not something that one thing happened and everything went to pot. It's been a build up from childhood, fitting in, family trauma, and it's, it hasn't all been bad. Like you said, there was elements there where it was fun at the time. You didn't start off to fill a void. It was just something that had just happened in that moment. Excuse me. And then it just drifted away. And it's interesting to see how compounding effect of positive can be exactly the same as a compounding effect of negative vibes. It doesn't have to be one big incident. It can be small areas, smallish areas, some bigger than others, that lead to a situation that somebody's in. And as you said, there was points there where you then asked, you knew something needed to change, which was fantastic. You decided. I think you said there you were in prison at that point where you had that moment. Can you share kind of what made you go?
No, when I like in prison was just I was just thinking to myself, how did I get here? But it was for another year and a half, almost 2 years out of another of struggling. See, this is the insidiousness of alcoholism, is that whatever happens to you, whatever consequence happens to an alcoholic, they can forget it pretty quickly. And that's the bit that kills people like you, like me, is that there's 2 elements to being an alcoholic, Shaun. Number one is that, and this is proven, there's a scientific papers that back that about 1 in 10 people don't have the enzymes in their liver sufficient to break down alcohol. There's elements of alcohol called acetaldehyde and acetone, and they both they create cravings for more. So, and I'm sure people that once they have a drink, they want more, and they'll go until they empty the bar. But that's one element of it. The other element is that knowing that you have this allergic reaction. Allergy just means an abnormal reaction. You're going to do it anyway. And that's why, whatever the consequences are for someone like me, it's never going to be enough to keep you sober. You're always going to be able to, oh, it wasn't that bad. Surely a glass of wine's okay. I'll be okay. It'll be different this time. I'll just have wine. I'll manage well. I'll have a glass of water after. And it never, ever ends up that way. And that's why you need to treat it's called the obsession of the mind, which is the thing that will blot out the delusion. You hear about delusion of alcoholics.
Yeah.
And I think it was only when that ego part of me got smashed by alcohol that I was able to ask for help. But it still took a couple. And like I said, I felt death.
Yeah.
And this is why I tell my story, Shaun. This is why I'm quite open about this, like everything from a childhood. As you said, it was like all pieces of the puzzle, right? Also, and it's and so if somebody can identify with something along the line, they're doing insane things to feel accepted, maybe some childhood trauma. These are all indicators that something in you could align with having challenges with alcohol or substances, to treat the trauma. Gabor Mate, famous addiction specialist, he says, not why the addiction, but why the pain.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I got to answer. Not why am I drinking? I know why I'm drinking, because it takes the pain. It's a solution. So why the pain? And that's what I got to treat, was the pain and the fear.
Yeah. And that's what it is, right? It's that surface level. We as humans, we play on the surface a lot. I need to stop drinking. I need to stop eating. I need to start having sugar. But, if alcohol was removed from this world, we would still live. I'm not saying an alcoholic would survive and such, but in the grand scheme of things, we would get the nutrition and the foods that we needed to survive. So then it's looking deeper into that surface. What is this hole that has? What is this pain? How that day that you said help me to this gentleman that you wanted the life, not so much what was the moment like, but what led you to saying help me? Because you could have done at any other point. What was it about that day?
Well, it was 3 days after the 28th of May. So the 28th of May is when I woke up, knowing that a drink would kill me, and having these like delirium tremens, like shakes really violently. And I ended up something that I don't recommend anybody do, but I had been to detoxes in hospitals many times to come off of alcohol, and I kind of knew the process. So I took myself through that process at home, which is very, very dangerous. I do not recommend it to anybody. But it took me 3 days to walk normal. Well, not even normal, just to walk and not fall over. And I knew I needed to get to a 12-step meeting. And I went down, and the guy who was sponsoring me, who told 8 months before, told me not to go on that date with that girl, said, "Nick, I love you, but you're going to have to try this with someone else." So rejection. I had rejection. I was humiliated. The guy who's meant to be my sponsor told me that it was hurting him by working with me. So I immediately looked for something. And I knew the guy who became my sponsor literally 30 seconds later, even though, I saw him walking up the stairs, I knew his story. So I needed something. And that's when it was almost like I needed him to accept me, so I wasn't rejected again, that I said, help me. I don't even know if I was saying help me for alcohol, but it just helped me because I'm so alone.
Yeah.
I've just been rejected, and I just said, help me. And he started working with me a week later. So there's a cute story in that too, but we don't have to go into this now. He used to be a homeless man in Toronto who all this now was driving around in a BMW, had just bought his first property, and was doing his master's. He turned his life around from being a homeless guy to, a very highly respected businessman in Toronto. So that was the attraction, is like, oh, I'm more or less homeless because I wasn't paying rent. I was living and squatting in my flat, and I needed to have some hope, and he gave me some hope.
And this is a theme we get quite a lot in the podcast, which I call accidental intent. I do believe things happen for a reason. And from an outsider looking in, it looks like now you have your purpose. What are you doing now to? I don't know. Maybe you explain it. Are you giving back? Are you doing what you're passionate about? What's led you to the point of what you're doing now?
So, took me 3 months to go through the steps, and I was unemployable, basically at the time. I mean, my teeth were bad. I had like no tooth here, and I looked pretty beaten up. All I had was 12 steps and the fellowship and the recovery, and I really threw myself at it. And after 3 months of going through the steps, he said, "You're sponsoring men now." So I would be going to the same meetings that I was crying in, months before, with, out, like drunk, where guys were like, "Nick, like something's happened to you. Can you please show me what happened? Like, how did you do it?" So I started sponsoring men, and I became very active in sponsoring. It's a 12-step program. The 12th step is to become a sponsor. Without doing all 12 steps, it's it doesn't work, and that's so, and I've seen it so many times that you need to do all 12 steps for it to work. So I just became kind of like this Mr. AA guy. Everyone's like, Nick's lit up. They would like, oh, it's Mr. AA, because I started doing big book studies, and I started going to conferences, and I just did a lot of service. I became my home group's librarian, and eventually I started to get my life back a little bit, and I was like, wow, what's different this time? And what was different, Shaun, is that I got sober the same time two other guys did, a guy named Jose and a guy named Kevin. And we were both just messes. But what happened in that 3 months while it took me to go through the steps is that I became accountable to these two gentlemen, and that we would text each other before a meeting, and they're like, let's meet at second cup for a drink, and then we'll go like a coffee, and then then we started doing things together. And I was like, wow, do you know what's really different this time is that I had a little tribe. I had a tribe to keep me accountable through my recovery. And then I was like, I need to, like, 12 steps in with alcohol. If they've got the corner of the market, they're good at what they do. If you do what they suggest, it's going to work. And I was like, what about the other 90% of the population that suffer from disconnection? What can I give them? And I sat there and I was like, I built a company. I called it Reborn. And when I tested that with people, they're like, "Oh, Nick, that sounds too religious." And the idea is that you can become reborn, right? You can, and I wanted to create an accountability creator for ex-athletes. So once you stop playing the sport, because that's what I noticed when I stopped playing hockey, that my real troubles began. And Reborn was born, except the name didn't sit well. And it was at the same time that Jeremy Clarkson got fired from Top Gear, and him and Hammond and May started something called Drive Tribe. And this was before Amazon. And I was like, oh, I really like that. The logo was cool and everything. And that's all I did. I just took the from Reborn and the Tribe from Drive Tribe. I stuck them together. I called it Retribe. And I started a company that was going to help ex-athletes who, when you stop playing your sport at any level, because I noted that a lot of top level elite athletes, the 0.1 percenters, have got a lot of resources. But what about guys like me who aren't made like 200 quid a week, no insurance, no life, no aftercare, no consideration of what it was like, or anybody say, Nick, are you okay with this transition, moving to the best job in sport, live TV guy? Like, it was all laid out for me. No tools, no understanding, nothing. So I was like, I'm going to create something like that for people, ex-athletes who might just feel uncomfortable in their life and go, do you know what? I can put the dots together. So when I stopped playing my sport, that I started to feel this uncomfortability. For the rest of us who played sport at any level, doesn't matter if you got your name in the newspaper or not, you play sport, you have the same connection as any other athlete. So that means you have the same disconnection as any other athlete when you stop playing. So Retribe is there to keep you connected with a group of people who may have had similar challenges to you, so that you can start coming to workshops and seminars and just hang out and go for coffees and just stay accountable in each other's lives. And I continue to be very involved in 12-step recovery. But what it was, Shaun, is like when I moved back I ended up getting I got my teeth done. I got a gig back in TV. It brought me back to London, and I was like, okay, I'm going to be a TV presenter now. And people like Gabby Logan and Kirsty Gallagher and Simon Lazenby, they were all people who I came up through at Sky. They all have tens of thousands of followers on Instagram, and I couldn't even get an agent. And I was like, what is going on? You're such a loser, Nick. Like, you can't get back in TV, and you just did 3 weeks and you were good. Like, what's going on? And I looked in the mirror and I was really hard on myself. And I said, you're such a loser, like Gabby Logan won't even take your phone call. And we were friends, And then something just made me write down all of the names of the people who I'd sponsored. And I was 4 years sober at the time, and the number was around 70 people. Wow. 70 people in 4 years is a lot of people to sponsor. Mm-hmm. And I went back to that mirror and I said, Nick, I'm proud of you. First time those words ever came out of my mouth at 49 years old. You're really good at helping people who are struggling with alcohol. And that was when my purpose was revealed to me. And that is how I am now at 8 years sober, 53 years old, stepdad, husband, company guy, company owner, founder, whatever, of a not-for-profit business, where I wake up every morning and I know that if there's somebody out there who's having challenges with alcohol use or any other substance, that they can reach out to me and I can either help them or point them in the way of another solution because they trust me. Because I've been very open and vulnerable with my story, that people go, "Oh, I get it. Nick felt like that. I kind of felt like that. I'm going to reach out to him." And that's given me my purpose, Shaun. And that's it.
Yeah. So you can see how it's all aligned. Desperate to fit in, desperate to find your people, and it didn't work out. Yet it has. You have found your tribe. You have found your purpose, and I think that's what life is all about: is understanding the highs and lows that you go through. If you learn from it, if you trust and grow with it, you'll find it. You'll find what it is. Sometimes you might need help. Sometimes you might need some guidance in it. And as you said there, which is something I use quite a lot, is sometimes our core problem doesn't need to affect the other areas. Okay, I can't get a job in TV, but look at all of these other fantastic things that are going on in my life. That is actually not as big as it needs to be. And I'm not going to give it the hold that it used to have, because now I've got X, Y, and Z and my values are aligning, which is fantastic. What's next for you, Nick?
Well, I'm going to bring Retribe back to its core. I know I've moved out of the UK, but the UK hockey family really means a lot to me. It's given me a lot of friends, a lot of connection. And since I've been involved in hockey at some level or another for 30 years in England, the resources for players has been non-existent. I know they're getting a little bit better at it, but there still is no idea of like how to prepare guys for life after the game, or making sure you're properly covered with insurance, or making sure someone's looked over your contract, making sure there's somebody there for you to talk to if you're having any challenges with anything. Because I know that going to a coach or a GM with a challenge is like a no-go for a lot of guys.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really concentrating on building a thing called the UK Ice Hockey Stick Together Tribe. We're using Facebook as a platform for it. We've got over 440 members now. I know you're one of them, where I'm basically providing exclusive support, which will be peer-to-peer support and support with my business partner, who is a sports psychologist, Dr. Misha Jervis. She's one of the most prominent sports psychologists around. She understands life after sport, but also, and the transition, but also like trauma with athletes. So we did a couple of sessions a few weeks ago on concussion, which has really opened up a lot of people's eyes. You're going to be coming on and talking about other services that the services you provide, but also the other services that you've learned about with regards to suicide prevention. So really, and it's just for them, Shaun. It's not going to be something that we're putting out to the general public. And I always say it's because they deserve it. For once in their life, they can have some people stand up for them and say, we are here to create a space where you can support one another, but also we're here to give you some help and advice. And that's the aim. And we're looking right now at building some technology so it can be a standalone workable app for people. Which then, who knows, if it works with the UK hockey community, then it can work with any other community, and we can scale it that way. But right now, this is my aim: is to grow a support network for the UK ice hockey family.
Yeah. And just repeat the name again, just for anybody that's looking to find it.
It's the UK Ice Hockey Stick Together Tribe. It's a Facebook group, but also like it's my website re-tribe.com. There's like, you can connect with me on that, and any other socials with Nick Rothwell. You can connect with me if you have any questions. Yeah.
And if there is anybody that is potentially struggling with alcohol right now, is the Retribe website the best place to get you?
Yeah, or the Retribe website, or any Nick Rothwell socials, Twitter, all my DMs are open. And folks, you don't have to end up where I ended up to create a healthier relationship with alcohol. I'm just one of those cases that had a rock bottom that's pretty bad. It's not the worst that I've ever heard. It was pretty bad. But it's more about the relationship with alcohol, why we drink, what it gives us. And I can help people either in 12-step recovery or through our sober coaching programs to help create a healthy relationship with alcohol, whether it's harm reduction or abstinence.
Yeah. Nick, thank you so much. I love everything that you're doing. I love how open you are about it, and how you're willing to grow with your own story as well. I think is fascinating. Sometimes people reach the point where they feel like, okay, well, I've done it now. There's nothing left to do. Whereas actually there is, life is always evolving, always growing, and you're going with that, which I find, I just find incredible. So thank you for everything you're doing. I'm sure there's many people that will also be thanking you as well. But I do appreciate you coming on and sharing your story.
Well, Shaun, thanks for having me on, and likewise, I really appreciate what you do. I've seen, how you're helping people and your evolution as well over the couple of years that we've been in contact. Keep doing what you're doing, man. And I really appreciate you. So thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for anybody that is joining us today. If you've taken anything away from the session, please share the episode. Please send it to a friend who may be struggling. The aim of the podcast here is just each episode to help one person. If that's been you, then our job here is done. If not, maybe there is somebody that that you could help today, that knows that they should be saying help me, but they haven't been able to do it yet. So thank you very much, everybody. And as I like to remind you all before you go, there is always another game. Take care, everybody.